I didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
She accepted $3,000 to go on a date looking ugly. What she didn't expect was that he was the most powerful man in the country, the Mafia boss. Now her lie comes with a dangerous price. The problem? He never expected to fall in love.
Welcome to my library. I'm Lena, and our story is just beginning.
Chapter 1. The strangest deal of her life.
What will become of me?
There are stupid things you do for money, and then there are absolutely insane things you do when you're desperate. I was in the second group. Maybe that's why I agreed to it without thinking twice. Or maybe because the $3,000 offered was exactly what I needed to pay for my sister's treatment this month. It didn't matter. In the end, there I was, standing in front of the mirror in my tiny bedroom, wearing a faded gray sweatshirt that had seen better days and sweatpants that matched a lazy Sunday watching bad TV shows better than a date at one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. My hair was pulled into a messy bun, purposely disheveled, with strands escaping in every direction, and I had just put on pale pink lipstick, almost childish, that made me look 15. Perfect. It was exactly what that woman had asked for. Go ugly. Go awkward. Make him give up. Her words echoed in my head as I looked at myself in the mirror, almost laughing at my own reflection. She had called me 3 days ago, referred by a mutual friend who knew about my desperate financial situation. Her voice was nervous, almost whispered, as if she were confessing a crime. I need someone to go on a date in my place, she had said, and before I could ask if she was crazy, she dropped the number. $3,000. For one night. I should have hung up on her. But when you're behind on bills, with a sister who depends on expensive insulin and a job that barely pays rent, you listen. So I listened, and the more she talked, the more absurd it became. She had been chosen by his family for an arranged date, some kind of old agreement between companies, powerful families, those things I thought only existed in old movies. But she didn't want to go. She was afraid of him, found him too intimidating when she saw a photo the family showed her. There's something in his eyes, she had said with a trembling voice, something that scares me. And then came the really crazy part. She wanted me to go in her place, pretending to be her, but doing it on purpose so he'd lose interest. So he himself would give up on the date before things went too far. That way she'd be free from the commitment without disappointing the family, without causing a scandal. I laughed, literally laughed during the call, but she was serious, completely serious, half now, half later. So I said yes, because when you have your electricity cut off and the pharmacy calling you about overdue prescriptions, you do things you never imagined doing. Now, looking at my reflection, I wondered if I had completely lost my mind. Was this illegal? Probably not. Unethical? Definitely. But necessary? Absolutely. I grabbed my old purse, a fabric thing that had seen much better days, and took a deep breath. It was just a date, a few hours of pretending. I just needed to be uninteresting enough for him to want to run away. How hard could it be? Rich men liked sophisticated, elegant women who knew how to talk about expensive wines and trips to Europe. I would be the opposite of that. Simple, boring, common. The restaurant was downtown, a place way too sophisticated for someone like me. I had to take 2 buses to get there, and when I finally got off at the right stop, I felt even more out of place. There were imported cars parked in front, a valet in an impeccable suit opening doors, and people coming and going with that casual elegance that only people with real money can have. Women in high heels and dresses that sparkled under the streetlights. Men in suits who had never stepped on a bus in their lives. I, on the other hand, looked like someone who had gotten lost on the way home. An intruder, an imposter, which I was, technically. I took a deep breath, adjusted the strap of my purse on my shoulder, and pushed the heavy glass door. The interior was even more intimidating than I had imagined. Enormous crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling. Tables with impeccable white tablecloths were strategically distributed throughout the room, and waiters moved like dancers in a perfectly rehearsed choreography. Everything screamed luxury. Everything screamed old money. Everything screamed that I didn't belong there. The air smelled of expensive perfume mixed with exotic spices, or just the smell of privilege. The maitre d' approached with a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. He looked me up and down, his eyes pausing on my sweatshirt, then on my old purse, then on my makeup-free face, clearly confused by my appearance. A wrinkle of disapproval formed between his eyebrows, but he maintained his professional mask. "Good evening," he said in that neutral tone that people in luxury services master perfectly, and I could almost hear the silent question. "What is someone like you doing here?" "I have a reservation," I said, trying to sound confident. "Under Victoria Ashford." It was hard to lie about my name. It wasn't Victoria. It's Maya, I thought, but I continued with the lie. He checked the elegant list attached to a leather folder, sliding his finger down the page, and nodded. Of course. Please follow me. He guided me through the main room, and I could feel the stares, conversations stopping subtly, people turning discreetly to watch me, a woman in sweatpants in a place like this. I was the show of the night. My palms started to sweat. My heart beat faster with each step. My old sneakers made a muffled sound against the marble floor. This is ridiculous, I thought. Absolutely ridiculous. The maitre d' stopped at a table in the corner, partially isolated by elegant dark wood screens. The table for two was set up as if it were a ceremony. 2 crystal glasses, gleaming silver cutlery, a small candle in the center. The light was soft, even romantic. He hasn't arrived yet, the maitre d' said. Can I bring you something to drink while you wait? Water, I said too quickly. Just water, please. He nodded and walked away, and I sat down in the chair. The chair was welcoming, upholstered in soft velvet. The table had more cutlery than I knew how to use. There were 3 forks of different sizes. For what? And the elegant silence around me was disturbing, broken only by the discreet murmur of conversations at other tables and the soft clinking of cutlery against fine porcelain. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my heart. Focus. You just need to be boring, awkward, talk too much about silly things, drop things, make him want to run away. Easy. The waiter brought the water in a glass pitcher with lemon slices floating, and I thanked him quietly, picking up the glass and taking a big sip. Okay, I could do this. It was just acting. A few hours and it would all be over. But then I heard footsteps, firm, confident, echoing against the marble with an authority that made people move instinctively, the kind of footsteps that command attention without asking. The room seemed to get quieter. Or maybe it was just the blood pounding in my ears, and when I looked up, everything stopped. He was standing a few feet from the table, and everything that woman had said made sense now. Intimidating was a crude understatement. He was tall, broad shoulders under a perfectly tailored black suit, elegant in a way that seemed natural, as if he had been born wearing silk and authority. His dark hair was impeccably combed back, revealing a face with strong lines, a defined jaw, and eyes that made me forget how to breathe. Dark. So dark they seemed almost black under that soft light. Intense, penetrating, dangerous. Eyes that seemed to see things other people hid. He looked at me, and something in the air changed. It became denser, more charged, as if the temperature had risen 10 degrees in a second. I forgot how to breathe. My brain went into complete panic. This was the man I was supposed to make give up? I was screwed, completely screwed. He approached slowly, each step measured and deliberate, his eyes never leaving mine, as if he were studying me, trying to discover all my secrets with just one look. And when he stopped beside the table, I felt his presence like a wave of heat that enveloped me completely. He smelled like something expensive and masculine, a fragrance that made my stomach tighten. He didn't say anything for a moment. He just studied me in silence, his eyes moving down my ridiculous sweatshirt, my messy hair, my childish lipstick, and then back to my eyes. There was something there, curiosity maybe, or amusement, or something more dangerous that I couldn't identify. And then, with a deep, velvety voice that did something absolutely strange to my stomach, he spoke. Victoria Ashford, I presume. My throat was dry, completely dry. I should have said yes, should have lied without hesitation, but something about the way he looked at me, as if he could see through every lie I'd ever told in my life, made me freeze. The words got stuck in my throat. Yes, I finally managed to say, my voice coming out weaker than I wanted. He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile wolves give before they attack, the kind of smile that says, I know exactly what you're doing. Dangerous, provocative, devastating. Interesting, he said, pulling out the chair with a smooth movement and sitting across from me, his eyes still fixed on me as if I were the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. Because you don't look anything like the photo they showed me. And it was at that exact moment, with my heart beating wildly and my mind going into complete panic, that I realized something fundamental. Everything had spiraled out of control before it even began. Chapter 2. He came out of obligation.
I'm disappointed.
2. I should have said something. Anything. But my brain had completely frozen. He kept looking at me, those dark eyes studying every detail of my face, as if he were trying to memorize or decipher something I didn't even know I was hiding. And then he leaned back in his chair, the movement fluid and controlled, and crossed his arms over his chest in a way that should have looked relaxed, but actually looked more like a predator sizing up its prey. You're nervous, he said, and it wasn't a question. It was a statement, as if it were obvious, as if he could read every thought running through my head. No, I lied automatically. and then realized how ridiculous that sounded considering my hands were trembling on the table. He smiled again, in that dangerous way that made my stomach flip. Liar. The word came out soft, almost affectionate, but there was a sharp edge to it that made me swallow hard. I should have been angry, should have been offended, but all I could feel was a strange heat rising up my neck. He picked up the elegant menu that was folded beside his plate, but his eyes never left mine, not for a second. Relax, he said, and his voice had that deep quality that seemed to vibrate in the air between us. I don't bite, at least not on the first date. My face got hot, extremely hot, and I knew I was blushing because I could feel my cheeks burning. Great, perfect, exactly the impression I wanted to make. The waiter appeared beside the table with that impeccable posture all the staff here seemed to have, and he ordered something in French that I didn't understand a word of. The waiter nodded and disappeared silently. French, of course, because men like him probably spoke 5 languages and dined at restaurants like this every night, while I could barely afford a decent pizza. Aren't you going to order anything? He asked, and there was a touch of amusement in his voice. I'm still looking. I lied again, because the truth was I had no idea what half those things on the menu meant. He leaned slightly forward, resting his elbows on the table, and suddenly the space between us seemed smaller, much smaller. Let me guess, he said, his voice low. You've never been here before. It wasn't a question. Again, he just knew. How the hell did he know? Is it that obvious? I asked, trying to sound casual and failing miserably. Yes, the answer was direct. No beating around the bush. But there was no cruelty in it. Just honesty. Brutal and unsettling. He kept looking at me in that way that made me feel completely exposed, as if he could see through the ridiculous sweatshirt, through the charade, through everything. But it's not a problem, he added after a moment. Actually, it's refreshing. Refreshing. What a strange word to use. I didn't know what to say, so I stayed silent, nervously fidgeting with the edge of the cloth napkin that was folded perfectly beside my plate. Dominic watched the movement, his eyes dropping to my hands, and something changed in his expression. It became softer, or maybe more curious. It was hard to tell. Why did you agree to come? He asked suddenly, and the question caught me completely off guard. What? This date. Why did you agree? His voice was casual, but there was an intensity in his eyes that told me the answer mattered, that he was really paying attention. I should have lied, should have made up something about respecting family traditions or being curious, but something about the way Dominic looked at me, the way he seemed genuinely interested, made me hesitate. I don't know, I said finally, which was partially true. And you? Why did you come? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he picked up his water glass and drank slowly, as if he were carefully considering what to say, or whether to say anything at all. When he finally put the glass back on the table, there was something different in his face, something darker. Obligation, he said simply. Obligation? An old agreement, between families, the kind of thing I would normally ignore, but he stopped, his jaw tightening slightly. But there were consequences to refusing this time. Consequences. The word hung in the air between us, loaded with a weight I didn't fully understand but felt in my bones. There was something more there, something dangerous, something that woman who hired me had felt when she looked at his photo. Dominic wasn't just rich. He was something else, something darker. You hate being here, I said, and it wasn't a question. It was an observation. He smiled, but this time it was different, more genuine, less guarded. Hated, he corrected. Past tense. Hated being here. My heart did a strange jump in my chest. And now I'm intrigued. The way he said that word, slowly, savoring each syllable, made something strange happen in my stomach. A heat that spread through my entire body. This wasn't going as planned. None of this was going as planned. I was supposed to be boring, awkward, making him want to run away. But instead, I was here, feeling my heart race every time he looked at me that way. The waiter returned with a bottle of wine, showing the label to Dominic as if it were a sacred ceremony. He nodded briefly, and the waiter poured a little into his glass, waiting for approval. He tasted it, nodded again, and the waiter filled both glasses before disappearing silently. I didn't order wine, I said, looking at the glass in front of me. I know. I ordered for you. There was something authoritative about that which should have irritated me, that should have made me want to throw the wine in his face, but instead it made me feel taken care of, in a strange and confusing way. I picked up the glass, more to have something to do with my hands than anything else, and took a small sip. It was good, better than any wine I'd ever tasted. Of course it was. You're uncomfortable, he said, and again it wasn't a question. A little, I admitted, because there was no point lying when he could clearly read every expression on my face. Why? Because of me? Because of all this? I made a vague gesture with my hand, indicating the restaurant, the table, the whole situation. It's not exactly my world. And what is your world? Dominic asked, leaning even further forward, and suddenly I could feel his heat, could feel that intense presence that seemed to fill all the space around us. I hesitated, because the truth was ugly. The truth was a tiny apartment with overdue bills and a sick sister, and a job that barely paid enough to survive. The truth was that I was here for money, that I was lying, that I was pretending to be someone I wasn't. It doesn't matter, I said, finally looking away. It's not interesting. Let me be the judge of that. His voice had that commanding quality again, that tone that didn't accept arguments. But there was something else there too, genuine interest, as if he really wanted to know, as if I really mattered, and that was more dangerous than anything else, because it was making me want to trust him. It was making me forget why I was really here. The waiter came back to take our orders, and I silently panicked, looking at the menu I still hadn't read properly. "She'll have the same as me," Dominic said softly, taking the menu from my hands with a gentle movement. I should have protested, should have said I could choose for myself, but the truth was, I was grateful, because I had no idea what to order. When the waiter walked away, silence fell between us again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged, electric, full of unspoken things. "You're different from the photo," he said again, but this time there was something more in his voice. Completely different. Different how? I asked, my heart racing. More real. More you. He paused, his eyes searching mine. "Whoever you really are." And there it was. The suspicion. The doubt. He knew something wasn't right. Maybe he didn't know exactly what, but he knew. And instead of pushing him away, instead of making him want to leave, that seemed to have hooked him even more, seemed to have made him more curious, more interested. I was in trouble. Serious trouble. Because for the first time since I took that money, since I agreed to that ridiculous charade, I wanted this to be real. I wanted Dominic to be looking at me that way because he really saw me. Not the Victoria Ashford I was pretending to be, but me, the real me. And that was impossible. Completely impossible. Because he would never know who I really was. Because all of this was a lie. And lies always come to an end. Chapter 3. The most crooked and most real date.
I'm gonna stay.
The food arrived on plates that looked like works of art. Small portions beautifully arranged that probably had complicated French names and cost more than my weekly rent. I looked at the plate in front of me, trying to identify what exactly I was seeing, and realized I had no idea. There was something that looked like fish, decorated with delicate herbs, and a sauce that formed an elegant design on the white plate. Beautiful, intimidating, completely outside my reality. "You're not eating," Dominic observed, and when I looked up, he was watching me with that intensity that was already starting to make me nervous in ways I didn't want to admit. "I'm just admiring it," I said, which was partially true. "It looks too much like art to eat." He smiled, and this time it was genuine, reaching his eyes in a way that completely transformed his face. Less intimidating, more human, devastatingly attractive. "It's just food," he said. "Good food, but still food." I picked up my fork, determined to at least try to look like I knew what I was doing, and it was exactly at that moment that everything started to fall apart. Literally, because when I went to cut the fish, my hand slipped, the fork flew to the side, hit the edge of the plate, and a generous portion of sauce splattered directly onto the impeccable white tablecloth. My face turned red instantly. "I'm so sorry," I said too quickly, grabbing my napkin and trying to clean the mess, which only made things worse because now there was a brown smear spreading across the white fabric. "I'm so clumsy. I really am sorry. This is—" "Stop," Dominic said, and his voice had that gentle command that made me freeze. I looked up and he was smiling. It wasn't a polite or forced smile. It was genuine, amused, as if this were the most charming thing he'd seen all day. "It's nothing," he said, and then, surprisingly, he picked up his own napkin and reached across the table to help clean, his fingers brushing against mine for a second that seemed to last an eternity. The touch was brief, accidental, but it sent an electric current up my arm that made me hold my breath. Our eyes met across the table, and for a moment, everything stopped. The restaurant, the conversations around us, everything disappeared except those dark eyes looking at me as if they could see straight into my soul. "Breathe," he said softly, and it was only then that I realized I was holding my breath. I let out the air in a nervous laugh, the sound coming out louder than I intended, and immediately covered my mouth with my hand. Great. Perfect. Now I was laughing like an awkward teenager. Exactly what I needed. But Dominic didn't seem to mind. If anything, he seemed more interested. The waiter appeared discreetly, replacing the stained tablecloth with a new one without saying a word, disappearing as silently as he appeared. Professionalism at its finest. "Sorry," I said again, quieter this time. "I'm not exactly used to places like this." I noticed, Dominic said, but there was no judgment in his voice. And I like that. You like clumsy women who spill food? I asked before I could stop myself, and then wanted to shove the words back in my mouth. He leaned back in his chair, picking up his wine glass, his eyes never leaving mine. I like real women, he said. Women who don't pretend to be something they're not just to impress me. The irony of those words hit me like a punch to the stomach, because that was exactly what I was doing. Pretending, lying, being someone I wasn't. Except I was doing the opposite of what I should be doing. I should be pretending to be sophisticated, elegant, and instead I was being myself, clumsy, nervous, real. You must know a lot of women who pretend, I said, trying to steer the conversation away from me. Too many, he replied, and there was something tired in his voice. Women who want what I can offer, the money, the power, the name, but never me. There was something vulnerable in that admission that caught me off guard, as if for a moment the mask had fallen, and I was seeing the real man beneath all that authority and control. I should have said something comforting or intelligent, but instead, my mouth opened, and the words came out before I could think. Well, I definitely don't want your money, I said, and then realized how that sounded. I mean, not that I couldn't use money, because who couldn't, right? But that's not why I just meant that. I stopped, realizing I was making everything worse. You know what? Just ignore everything I just said. Dominic laughed, a real laugh, deep, that came from his chest and completely transformed his expression. I had never heard that sound before, and it did something strange to my heart, made it speed up and soften at the same time. He stopped, shaking his head, still smiling. Different, completely different. Different is just a nice word for weird, I said, picking up my wine glass and taking a bigger sip than I intended. No, he said, and his voice had that serious quality again. Different is an honest word for extraordinary. My heart jumped, literally jumped in my chest as if it had forgotten how to beat normally. No one had ever called me extraordinary before, especially not a man who looked like he'd stepped out of some luxury magazine, especially not someone like Dominic, who was probably used to women who were actually extraordinary. You don't know me, I said, my voice coming out softer than I intended. No, he agreed, but I want to. The way he said that, with that absolute intensity, as if it were the most important thing in the world, made my breath catch. I picked up my fork again, needing something to do with my hands, something to distract me from those eyes that seemed to see far more than I wanted to reveal. There's not much to know, I said, finally managing to bring a piece of fish to my mouth. It was delicious, obviously, but I could barely taste it with my heart beating so fast. Let me be the judge of that, Dominic said, echoing his earlier words. Tell me about yourself. Really? What do you want to know? I asked, buying time. Everything, he replied simply. Start wherever you want. I should have made up a story. Should have created some sophisticated version of a life that seemed to belong to this world of expensive restaurants and designer dresses. But something about the way he looked at me, the way he really seemed to care, made me want to be honest. At least partially. I work at a coffee shop, I said, the words coming out before I could think better of it. It's not glamorous. It's not interesting, but it pays the bills. Most of the time. I waited for judgment, for disappointment, for that look rich people give when they realize you're not from their world. But it didn't come. And do you like it? He asked, genuinely curious. The job? No, I laughed, surprised by my own honesty. But I like the people, the regulars who show up every morning and order the same thing. There's something comforting about it, you know? The routine, the predictability. And outside of work, what do you like to do? Read, I said, and then felt my face heat up because that sounded so boring. I know. Super exciting. A girl who works at a coffee shop and reads books in her spare time. Practically straight out of an indie movie. What kind of books? He asked, leaning forward, and I realized he was genuinely interested. He wasn't just making polite conversation. He really wanted to know. Romance, I admitted, deciding I'd already embarrassed myself enough today. The really dramatic ones, with impossible happy endings and heroes who probably don't exist in real life. And why do you like them? No one had ever asked me that before. Most people just rolled their eyes when I mentioned romance, as if it were something inferior. But Dominic was waiting for my answer, as if it really mattered. Because, I stopped, trying to find the right words. Because in the end, no matter how messy everything got, there's always hope. There's always a happy ending. And I guess I like to believe that's possible, you know? Even if it's only in books. Something changed in his expression. It became softer, more open, as if I had said something that resonated with him in a way he didn't expect. Hope is important, he said quietly, especially when you live in a world that's constantly trying to take it away from you. There was weight in those words. History. Pain, maybe. And suddenly I wanted to know everything about him. wanted to understand what made this powerful, intimidating man say something so vulnerable. "And you?" I asked. "What's your world? Besides all this?" I made a vague gesture at the restaurant around us. He was silent for a moment, swirling the wine in his glass, and I thought maybe he wouldn't answer, that maybe I had crossed some invisible line. But then he spoke. "Complicated," he said finally, "full of obligations I didn't choose, expectations I didn't ask for, people who want something from me before they even know my name. That sounds—" I stopped, searching for the right word. "Lonely." His eyes met mine, and there was surprise there, as if no one had seen that before, as if no one had cared enough to see. "It is," he admitted, "very lonely." The air between us changed again. It became denser, more intimate, as if we were sharing secrets we shouldn't be sharing, as if we were crossing lines that should remain intact. I picked up my wine glass, needing to break the moment before I drowned in it, and that was exactly when I managed to knock over the glass. The wine spread across the table like a red wave, staining the new white tablecloth, dripping onto my sweatpants. "Oh my God," I said, jumping from my chair. "I'm so clumsy. This is ridiculous. I can't believe that." "Stop," Dominic said, and this time there was genuine laughter in his voice. He was standing too, coming around the table, and suddenly he was beside me, so close I could feel his heat, could feel that overwhelming presence that made me forget how to think straight. He grabbed napkins, trying to help dry my pants, and his fingers brushed my waist for an accidental second that made my entire body wake up. "Sorry," he said, pulling back quickly, but his eyes remained on mine, and there was something there, something intense and hot that made my stomach clench. "No," I said quickly. I'm a disaster. You're probably regretting coming." "I'm not," he said, and the absolute certainty in his voice made me stop. "Not at all." We stood there, very close to each other, the chaos of soaked napkins and stained tablecloths around us, and all I could think about was how dark his eyes were up close, how defined his jaw was, what it would be like if he leaned just a few inches closer. The waiter appeared again, professional as always, cleaning everything up quickly, offering to change the tablecloth once more. Dominic dismissed him with a gesture, leaving some bills on the table that were probably more than the total amount of the check. "Let's get out of here," he said suddenly. My heart raced. "Leave? Walk? Talk? Away from forks and wine glasses you can knock over." There was humor in his voice, but also something more, an invitation, a promise of something beyond that formal restaurant, and I knew I should say no, knew I should end this ridiculous date and take my remaining $1,500 and never look back. But when he extended his hand to me, when those dark eyes looked at me as if I were the only person in the world who mattered, I took his hand. Because in that moment, I wasn't pretending anymore. I was being real, and he was being real. And all of this was terrifying and thrilling and completely wrong, but it felt so right. Chapter 4. The lie starts to weigh.
I want to see you.
We walked for almost an hour, through the illuminated streets downtown, passing elegant shop windows and cafes that were still open, even though it was almost midnight. Dominic hadn't let go of my hand since we left the restaurant. His fingers were intertwined with mine in a way that felt natural, as if our hands had been made to fit together that way. And the scariest thing was that I didn't want him to let go. We talked about everything and nothing at the same time. He told me about books he had read when he was younger, before life got too complicated for fiction. I told him about my embarrassing obsession with cooking shows despite being incapable of making anything beyond instant noodles. He laughed, a lot, and every time that deep, genuine sound came from him, something in my chest tightened in a way that was both wonderful and terrifying. When we finally stopped in front of an imposing building where a uniformed doorman nodded at Dominic, reality started to return. The night was ending. The date was ending. And I didn't know what to do with all the confusing feelings that were tangling in my stomach. "This is my building," he said, turning to face me, still holding my hand. "I know it's late, but I should go," I said quickly, because I knew that if he invited me up, if he looked at me that way for one more second, I would say yes. And that would be a mistake. A huge mistake. He studied my face for a long moment, those dark eyes searching for something I didn't know if I wanted him to find. "I want to see you again," he said, and it wasn't a question. It was a statement, a certainty. My heart raced. Pure panic flooded my system. "Dominic, tomorrow night," he continued, stepping closer, and suddenly the space between us disappeared. "Or the day after if you need time. But I want to see you again. I need to see you again." The intensity in his voice, the way he looked at me as if I were something precious and rare, made my throat tighten. This wasn't in the plan. This wasn't part of the deal. It was supposed to be one date, one night, make him lose interest and leave. But everything had gone wrong. Terribly, wonderfully wrong. I don't know if Please. The word came out soft, almost vulnerable, and coming from a man like Dominic, that meant everything. I should have said no, should have made up an excuse, should have ended it right there before it got even more complicated. But when I opened my mouth, what came out was completely different. Okay, his face lit up. It wasn't a big or exaggerated smile, but there was something in his eyes, a deep satisfaction, that made my heart melt completely. Okay, he repeated, and then slowly, closing the space between us, he lifted his free hand and touched my face. His fingers brushed my cheek with a gentleness that completely contrasted with all that intensity and power that emanated from him. I stopped breathing, completely. My heart was beating so loud I was sure he could hear it. He leaned in, slowly, giving me time to pull away, to say no, to stop this. But I didn't move. I couldn't. When his lips touched my forehead, soft and warm, everything inside me melted. It was chaste, innocent, nothing like the intense dramatic kisses in my romance books, but somehow it was more intimate, more meaningful, more real. When he pulled back, his eyes searched mine again. "Good night, Victoria," he said softly, and hearing that fake name come from his mouth was like getting slapped in the face. My name isn't Victoria. My name is Maya, and this lie was already completely consuming me. Reality came back like a cold wave. "Good night," I managed to say, my voice coming out weak. He waited until I got a taxi, insisting on paying even when I protested, and stood on the sidewalk watching me until the car turned the corner, and he disappeared from view. It was only then that I let my head fall back against the seat and closed my eyes, letting all the guilt and confusion hit me at once. What the hell had I done? My phone buzzed in my pocket, a message from an unknown number that I knew exactly who it was, the woman who had hired me, the real Victoria. How did it go? Did he give up? I looked at the message, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I should tell the truth, that I had failed miserably, that instead of making him lose interest, I had done exactly the opposite, that he wanted to see me again, that I had agreed, but instead, I typed only, "Need to talk to you. Tomorrow?" The reply came almost immediately. "My house, 10 a.m. I'll send the address." I spent the entire night awake, staring at the ceiling of my tiny bedroom, replaying every moment of the date in my head, the way Dominic had laughed, how he had looked at me, how his hand had felt in mine, how all of it had seemed real, because it had been real, at least on my part, and that made everything 1,000 times worse. At 10 in the morning, I was standing in front of a house that was bigger than the entire building where I lived. High gates, perfectly manicured gardens, the kind of place where people like me only entered through the back door. I rang the bell and a female voice sounded through the intercom. "Yes, it's me, from the date." There was a pause, and then the gate opened with an electronic buzz. I walked down the stone path to the main door, my stomach churning with each step. The door opened before I could ring the bell, and there she was, the real Victoria Ashford. She was beautiful, obviously. Perfectly wavy blonde hair, impeccable makeup even though it was mid-morning, a casual dress that was probably designer, everything I wasn't. "Come in," she said, her gaze quickly assessing me before stepping away from the door. I entered a house that looked like it came out of a decorating magazine, everything white and beige and perfectly coordinated. She guided me to a living room, where I sat uncomfortably on a sofa that was softer than my bed. "So?" she asked, sitting in an armchair across from me, crossing her legs elegantly. "Did he give up? Did he say he doesn't want to see me anymore?" I swallowed hard. "Not exactly." Her expression changed, became sharper. "What does that mean?" "It means that he wants to see you again. I mean, see me again. He thinks I'm you, so I was making a mess of this. He asked for another date." She went pale, visibly pale. No. This wasn't supposed to happen. You were supposed to make him give up. It was simple. Be boring. Uninteresting. How did you manage to screw this up?" Her voice was getting louder, more desperate, and I felt anger bubbling in me. "Sorry for not being boring enough for you," I said, my own voice getting firmer. "Sorry for being human." She stood up, starting to pace back and forth. "You don't understand. You don't know this man. You don't know who he really is, what he does. Then tell me," I challenged. "Tell me who Dominic is." She stopped pacing, looking at me with something that looked like genuine fear. "He's dangerous. His family, they control things. Businesses you don't want to know about. People you don't want to meet. And if he finds out you lied, that I lied." She shook her head. "It won't be good for either of us." My stomach sank. Part of me already knew there was something more to Dominic. The way people moved around him, the respect, the fear maybe. But hearing it confirmed was different. "So what do I do?" I asked, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. She stopped, looking at me with those calculating eyes. "You'll continue." "What?" "You'll keep pretending to be me. You'll go on one more date, 2, maybe, and then you'll break up with him, gently. Say it's not working, that you're too different. Whatever makes him lose interest without causing problems. I should have refused, should have thrown the money in her face and walked out of that ridiculous house. But then she said the magic words. I'll pay you more. $5,000 more. 3 dates. That's all I'm asking. $5,000. That would cover my sister's insulin for months, would cover the overdue bills, would give me a break I desperately needed. I looked at her, at this rich woman in her perfect house, asking me to keep lying to a man who was starting to mean something to me, a man who was dangerous, a man I should be avoiding. Okay, I said, hating myself with every syllable. Okay, I'll do it. The relieved smile that crossed her face made me feel sick. When I left that house 20 minutes later, with the promise of more money and more lies, all I could think about was the way Dominic had kissed my forehead, the way he had said my name, the wrong name, and for the first time, I wished I could go back in time, that I could have refused that money from the beginning, because now I was trapped in a web of lies, and the more time I spent with Dominic, the more painful it would be when everything fell apart, and it always fell apart. Lies always came to an end. Chapter 5. The First Fall. And the shadow of danger. 3 days after the first date, I was standing in front of my tiny closet, looking at the clothes I had and trying to decide what to wear. I should go with another sweatshirt, should try to maintain the charade of being uninteresting, but something in me couldn't, because the truth was, I wanted Dominic to look at me the way he had looked at me that night. I wanted to see him smile. I wanted to feel my hand in his again. And that made everything infinitely worse, because my name wasn't even Victoria. It was Maya, and he didn't know that. Would never know, because I was a liar, a fraud, someone who was being paid to deceive him. The thought made me feel sick, but not enough to stop, not enough to give up the extra $5,000 Victoria had promised, not enough to do the right thing. I ended up choosing a simple dress, nothing elegant or expensive, just something I had bought on sale a year ago and had never worn. It was dark blue, came to my knees and had long sleeves, basic, common. But when I looked in the mirror, I didn't feel common. I felt nervous, excited, like I was about to see someone who mattered, and he mattered. That was the problem. Dominic had asked to meet at a park near the river, something more casual than the restaurant, he said. More us, as if there were an us, as if this were real. When I arrived, he was already there, leaning against an iron railing overlooking the water, and when he saw me, his entire face changed, became softer, more open, happy. He was happy to see me, and that made my heart ache in ways I didn't know were possible. Hi, I said as I approached, suddenly shy in a way I hadn't been before. Hi, he replied, and then pulled me into a hug that caught me completely off guard. He smelled of that expensive, masculine fragrance that was already starting to become familiar. His arms around me were strong, secure, and for a moment, I allowed myself to relax in that embrace, allowed myself to pretend this was real, that I really was Victoria Ashford, that he was hugging me because he truly knew me. When we pulled apart, he kept one hand on my waist, as if he didn't want to let go completely. You look beautiful, he said, his eyes traveling over my face, my simple dress, as if I were wearing something straight off a runway. It's just an old dress, I said, feeling my face heat up. It's not about the dress, he replied, that deep voice doing strange things to my stomach. It's about you, and there it was again, that intensity, that way of making me feel like I was the only person who existed in his world. We walked along the river, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about a work project that was giving him a headache, being vague about the details, but making it clear it involved a lot of responsibility and difficult people. I told him about a regular customer at the coffee shop, who always ordered the same thing, but always complained it was different. Maybe she just wants attention, Dominic suggested with a smile. Or maybe your coffee really is inconsistent. Impossible, I said with feigned indignation. I make the best mediocre coffee in the city. He laughed, that sound I was already starting to love, and pulled me closer to him as we walked. It was easy, too easy, to forget this had an expiration date, to forget it was built on lies, to forget that at some point everything would fall apart. We stopped at a small cafe and bought hot chocolate even though the day wasn't that cold. We sat on a bench facing the water, our shoulders touching, and for one perfect moment, everything felt right, until my phone buzzed. It was Victoria, again. She had sent 3 messages since yesterday, all asking how it was going, reminding me of the plan, making sure I was going to break up with him soon. I turned off the screen without responding. Everything okay? Dominic asked, noticing my expression. Yes, I lied, forcing a smile. Just work. He studied my face for a moment, those dark eyes searching for something, but then nodded and changed the subject. We talked until the sun started to set, painting the sky in oranges and pinks, And when he suggested dinner, I said yes without hesitation, without thinking about the consequences, without thinking about anything except wanting to stay with him for a few more hours. The restaurant this time was different, still elegant, but more intimate, less formal. There were candles on every table and soft music playing in the background. Romantic, dangerously romantic. "You're different today," he observed while we waited for our food to arrive. "Different how?" I asked, my heart racing. Had he noticed something? Had he figured it out? "More relaxed," he said, leaning back in his chair, studying me in that way that made me feel completely exposed. "Like you're starting to trust me." Trust. The word hung in the air between us, loaded with painful irony, because he trusted me too, trusted that I was who I said I was, and I was betraying that trust every second. "And you?" I asked, needing to shift the focus. "Do you trust me?" Something darkened in his eyes, something deep and complicated. "I'm trying," he said finally, and there was brutal honesty in those words. "Trust doesn't come easy for me. Not in my world." "And what world is that exactly?" I asked, taking advantage of the opening. "Because you always talk about it like it's something separate, dangerous, different." He was silent for a long moment, swirling the wine in his glass, clearly considering how much to reveal. "It's complicated," he said finally. "My family, we have businesses that require certain care, certain precautions." "That's very vague," I pressed gently. He looked at me, and there was something vulnerable in his expression. "I know, and I'm sorry I can't be clearer, but there are things about my life that could scare you, that could push you away, and I don't want that." The sincerity in his voice, the genuine fear of losing me, made my heart clench, because he didn't know that the thing that should scare him was me, was the lie I was living, was the fact that none of this was real. "You couldn't scare me," I said, and it was true, partially, because whatever he was, whatever he did, it didn't change the way my heart raced when he smiled, didn't change the way I felt safe when he touched me. The food arrived and we ate, the conversation flowing easily to lighter topics. He told me about trips he had taken when he was younger. I told him how I had never left the country, how I had barely left the city. He didn't judge, didn't seem disappointed. If anything, he seemed fascinated, as if my ordinary life was exotic to him somehow. After dinner, we walked through the illuminated streets. The night was pleasant, with a gentle breeze that made the tree leaves whisper. Dominic held my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world, his fingers intertwined with mine, in a way that made my heart race and calm at the same time. We were passing an art gallery when it happened. A man came out of a nearby store, accompanied by two other men who were clearly security, dark suits, alert posture, the kind of people you noticed even when trying not to notice. The man saw Dominic and stopped abruptly. His eyes widened for a fraction of a second before he composed his expression. "Dominic," the man said, and there was something in his voice, excessive respect, or poorly disguised fear, maybe both. Dominic stopped too, and I felt his hand tighten on mine. His posture changed completely, became more rigid, more alert, more dangerous. The ease that had been there seconds ago disappeared, replaced by something cold and controlled that made me realize I didn't know this man as well as I thought. "Richard," Dominic said, his voice icy in a way I had never heard before. The man, Richard, looked at me briefly, curiosity, and something more, caution perhaps, clear in his eyes, before returning his attention to Dominic. "Didn't expect to see you around here. Thought you were dealing with that situation at the port." "It's handled," Dominic said, and the tone didn't allow for more questions. But there was weight in those two words. Implication, threat, maybe. There was a tension in the air that I didn't fully understand but could feel. Something dangerous, something wrong. Richard's two security guards moved subtly, positioning themselves in a way I recognized from movies. Protection, or threat. It was hard to tell. And then suddenly, there were more people. Two men appeared out of nowhere, positioning themselves behind Dominic and me. Also security guards, I realized with a cold shock. Where the hell had they been all this time? Had they been following us? During the entire date? "Everything all right here?" one of them asked, his voice low but clear, directed at Dominic, not me, as if I were irrelevant, as if he were the only one who mattered. "Yes," Dominic replied without looking back, his eyes fixed on Richard. "Richard was just leaving, weren't you?" It wasn't a question. It was an order disguised as a polite suggestion. Richard smiled, but there was no warmth there. There was poorly disguised nervousness. Of course. Enjoy your evening, Dominic." He nodded and walked away quickly, his security guards flanking him perfectly, and I could swear I saw relief in his shoulders when they turned the corner and disappeared. When they were gone, Dominic finally looked back, nodded briefly to the two men who had appeared, and they retreated, disappearing into the shadows, as silently as they had emerged, like ghosts, as if they had never been there. My heart was beating hard, too hard. My hands were shaking, and I knew he could feel it because he was still holding one of them. Who were those people? I asked, my voice coming out weaker than I intended. Dominic gently pulled me to the side, away from the middle of the sidewalk, his hand still holding mine, but with less tenderness now. More urgency, more protection. Just business, he said, but there was tension in his jaw. Nothing you need to worry about. You have security guards, I said, and it wasn't a question. Following us, the whole time. Were they there during the entire date? He hesitated, and in that hesitation was the answer. It's necessary, he said finally, as a precaution. Precaution against what? My voice was rising now, panic starting to seep in. Who was that man? Why did he seem so afraid of you? Dominic ran his free hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I had never seen in him before. Always so controlled, always so in command. But now there was a crack in that perfect facade. It's complicated, he said again, and I almost laughed at the futility of that answer. You always say that. Complicated. Your world. Your business. But you never tell me what that really means. He looked at me, and there was clear conflict in his eyes. Wanting to tell me versus needing to protect me. Or maybe it was wanting to trust versus having learned to never trust anyone. There are things in my life, he began slowly, choosing each word carefully, that aren't conventional. I've already said it. My family has businesses that some people consider questionable, and that comes with risks. What kind of businesses? I pressed, even knowing I shouldn't, even knowing that the more I knew, the more complicated everything would become. I can't tell you, he said, and there was finally brutal honesty there. Not because I don't trust you, but because this way you'll be safer, as if there were real danger, as if this weren't just paranoia or excessive precaution, as if people around him really needed protection from something or someone. I took a step back, releasing my hand from his, and I saw pain cross his face. You're scaring me, I admitted, and it was true. Not so much because of what he had said, but because of what he hadn't said. The implications, the genuine fear in that man Richard's eyes, the way the security guards had appeared out of nowhere as if they were always there, always watching. I know, Dominic said softly, approaching again, his hands reaching for my face, touching my cheek with a gentleness that completely contrasted with all the tension of the last few minutes. And I hate it. I hate that my life, my choices, my family might scare you, but I need you to know that I would never let anything hurt you. You're safe with me, always. The absolute certainty in his voice, the intensity in his eyes, should have comforted me, should have made me feel protected, but all I could feel was more confusion, more fear, because Victoria had been right. He was dangerous. Maybe not to me, maybe he would never hurt me physically, but he was involved in something dark. Something that required armed security guards and men with fear in their eyes. I need to go, I said suddenly, taking another step back, and I saw real hurt cross his face. Please don't, he said, and there was pleading in his voice. Don't let this push you away. Don't let my world push you away from me. I just need time to process all of this, I said, which was true, partially. The complete truth was that I needed space, needed to think, needed to decide whether to continue with this charade or run while I still could. He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, he said, but promise me one thing. Promise me you'll at least consider seeing me again. That you won't just disappear. I should have said no, should have cut everything off right there. But when I looked at those dark eyes full of vulnerability and hope, all I could do was nod. I promised to consider it, I said. He took me to a taxi, paying the driver in advance despite my protests, and stood on the sidewalk watching me until the car turned the corner. And as I looked through the back window, seeing his solitary figure disappear in the distance, all I could think was that I had crossed some invisible line. I had fallen, not just into his arms, but into something much deeper and much more dangerous, and I had no idea how to get out. Chapter 6. The Truth About Him.
I can't.
Total chaos. I spent 2 days avoiding Dominic's calls, 2 mornings waking up to messages from him on my phone. Simple, kind messages, asking if I was okay, if I needed space, saying he was there when I was ready to talk. Each message made my heart clench a little more, because he didn't know that while I was having a crisis about who he really was, he was falling in love with someone who didn't even exist. Victoria had called too, 3 times, each time more desperate, demanding I end everything, that I make Dominic give up once and for all. I ignored all the calls, because the truth was, I didn't know what to do anymore. Didn't know how to get out of this mess I had created myself. It was my coworker Jessica who changed everything. We were on break at the coffee shop, sitting in the small back room that eternally smelled of old coffee and burnt bread, when she grabbed her phone and showed me a photo. "Did you see this?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with that excitement of someone who had juicy gossip. "It happened last night. It was a newspaper photo. Online. A chaotic scene. Police lights. Yellow isolation tape. And in the center of it all, being escorted by police officers, was him, Dominic." My stomach dropped. I literally felt like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. "What?" I managed to whisper, taking her phone with trembling hands. "Dominic Ferrara," Jessica said, the name rolling off her tongue as if it were obvious, as if everyone should know who he was. "Son of Giovanni Ferrara. You know, the Ferrara family. They practically control half the city. Construction businesses, bars, nightclubs, and other things people don't talk about out loud. Ferrara. That was his last name. A last name I should have known. A last name everyone apparently knew except me. My vision started to blur at the edges. "What happened?" I asked, forcing the words out. "Investigation. Again. They're always investigating his family, but they never managed to prove anything." Jessica shook her head. "They say he took over the business after his father retired. That he's even colder, more calculating. That people disappear when they cross his path. People disappear." The words echoed in my head like an alarm bell. Dominic. The man who had held me so gently, who had laughed at my bad jokes, who had looked at me as if I were something precious. This Dominic made people disappear? "Are you okay?" Jessica asked, looking at me with concern. "You're pale." "I'm fine," I lied, returning the phone with visibly trembling hands. It's disturbing, isn't it?" But in my head, everything was falling apart. All the pieces fitting together into a horrible puzzle. The security guards, the fear in Richard's eyes, the way Dominic avoided explaining his business, the precautions, the danger he had mentioned. He wasn't just rich, wasn't just powerful. He was truly dangerous. Criminal, maybe. Mafia. The word appeared in my mind like lightning. Ferrara family. Of course. How had I been so stupid? I finished my shift in a state of shock. Mechanical. Serving coffee. Smiling at customers. Pretending my world wasn't imploding. When I finally left, night had already fallen, and all I wanted was to go home, hide under the covers, and pretend none of this was happening. But when I turned the corner onto my street, I stopped abruptly. There was a car parked in front of my building. An expensive car. Black. Elegant. And leaning against it, with his arms crossed in that posture I already recognized very well, was Dominic. My heart raced. Panic and anger and confusion, all mixing in a wave that left me dizzy. He saw me at the same instant, pushed himself off the car, starting to walk in my direction. But something in my expression must have stopped him because he froze halfway. "Victoria," he said, his voice coming out careful, as if he were dealing with a frightened animal. "I know you asked for space, but I needed to see you, needed to make sure you were okay." "I'm fine," I said, and my voice came out harder than I intended. "You should go," he frowned, taking another step closer. "What happened? What changed?" "I know who you are," I said, the words coming out in an explosion. "Dominic Ferrara, the Ferrara family. I know what you do, what your family does." He went completely still, his face closed off, that mask of control descending over his expressions like a curtain. "Who told you?" "Does it matter?" I practically shouted, and some people on the street turned to look. "You lied to me. About everything. About who you are. About your business. About the danger." "I never lied," he said, his voice getting lower, more dangerous. "I just didn't tell the whole truth." "That's the same thing." "It's not," he retorted, and now there was anger in his voice too. "I protected you, kept you away from things that could hurt you. That's not lying. That's caring." I laughed, a bitter sound that didn't seem like mine. "Caring? You call it caring to involve me with what exactly? Mafia? Organized crime? People who disappear when they cross your path?" Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Be careful what you say," he said quietly. "Be careful what you believe from gossip and newspaper headlines that know nothing about me or my family." "Then tell me the truth," I challenged, crossing my arms. "Tell me exactly what you do, exactly who you are. No omissions this time." He was silent for a long moment, his jaw tight, his eyes searching mine. And then finally he spoke. "My family has businesses, legitimate and less legitimate. We control construction, entertainment, security services. And yes, there are aspects of what we do that operate in gray areas of the law. But I'm not a monster. I don't hurt innocent people. I don't make people disappear for fun." He took a step closer, and I forced my feet to stay in place even though I wanted to step back. I was born into this life. I didn't choose it. And when my father decided to retire, the choice was either I took over or everything he built would crumble. People who depend on us would be left unprotected. So I took over. And yes, that comes with dangers, with enemies, with precautions. But everything I've done, every decision I've made, was to protect the people who matter to me. His voice became softer, more vulnerable, including you. You barely know me, I said, but my voice was shaking now. You don't really know me. I know enough, he replied, closing the distance between us, his hands reaching for my face but stopping in the air, as if asking permission. I know you're different from anyone I've ever met, that when I'm with you, I can forget everything else. I can just be me, not the Ferrara heir, not the boss, just Dominic. His hands finally touched my face, that gentle touch I already knew so well. I fell in love with you, he said, and the words came out like a painful confession. Since that ridiculous first date where you spilled sauce on the table, since that moment I knew, and I hate that my life, my family, my world might push you away. But I won't lie about what I feel. Tears burned in my eyes, because he was being honest. Finally, completely honest. And all I could think was that I didn't deserve that honesty, because while he was telling me the truth about who he was, I was still lying, still pretending to be Victoria Ashford, still being paid to deceive him. You can't fall in love with me, I said, my voice breaking. You don't know me. Then let me know you, he pleaded, his forehead touching mine. Let me in. Tell me your fears, your dreams, your scars, everything, because I want to know. I want to know every part of you. And it was at that moment I broke, completely, because he wanted to know someone who didn't exist, wanted to fall in love with a lie, and I had done this. I had created this impossible situation. I had hurt this man who was opening his heart in a way he probably never had before. I can't do this, I said, pulling away from his touch, every inch of distance physically hurting. I can't. We can't. Why? He asked, and there was genuine pain in his voice. Because I'm scared? Because I'm dangerous? Because my life is complicated? None of that matters if we feel the same about each other. You don't understand, I said, tears finally falling. There are things about me, things you don't know. Then tell me, he said again, desperate. Whatever it is, we can work it out, together. But I couldn't tell him my name wasn't Victoria, that I had been paid to make him hate me, that everything had started as a charade, because if I told him, I would lose not only him, but possibly much more, because men like Dominic Ferrara didn't react well to betrayal. I need to go, I said, taking another step back. Please, just let me go. Something broke in his expression, deep pain and incomprehension. If that's what you want, he said, his voice getting cold, that mask returning. I won't force you into anything. I would never do that. He turned to leave, toward the car, and every fiber of my being screamed for me to call him back, to tell the truth, to risk everything just to have a real chance with him. But fear won. Fear of what he would do when he found out. Fear of losing not only him, but my safety, maybe my life. Because dangerous men did dangerous things when they were betrayed. So I let him go. I stood there on the sidewalk, tears streaming down my face, watching the black car disappear into the night. And when I turned to enter my building, I saw a figure in the shadows, Victoria. She had witnessed everything, and the smile on her face told me she was satisfied, that everything was going exactly as planned. And I hated her, hated myself, hated the entire situation I had created, because I had lost something real, something precious, and it wasn't even mine to lose. Chapter 7. The villain enters the scene.
You are part of. Do you want to serve?
Victoria followed me into the building. I didn't even notice until I was climbing the stairs and heard the sound of her heels echoing behind me. When I stopped at my apartment door, she was there, perfectly composed, even after climbing 3 flights of stairs, not a hair out of place. We need to talk, she said, and it wasn't a request. I wanted to send her away, wanted to slam the door in her face, but something about the way she looked at me, something calculating and dangerous, made me hesitate. I opened the door, and she entered my tiny apartment, as if she were entering a contaminated place. Her eyes swept over the small space, the old furniture, the peeling walls, and I saw clear contempt in her expression. So this is how you live, she said, and there was no pity there, just cold observation. What do you want, Victoria? I asked, too tired for games. She turned to face me, and there was something different in her eyes now, something sharper, more ambitious. Change of plans, she said simply, crossing her arms. You're not going to break up with him anymore. I blinked, confused. What are you talking about? I just broke up. You saw. It's over. No, she said, shaking her head, a small, cruel smile forming on her lips. You're going back. You're going to apologize. You're going to say you were scared but thought better of it. And you're going to keep seeing him. My stomach churned. No, I'm not doing that. The deal was 3 dates. It's been more than 3. And besides, I broke up. It's over. The deal changed, she said, her voice getting harder. because I changed my mind about what I want. And what do you want? I asked, even though I already knew I wasn't going to like the answer. She approached, her eyes shining with something that looked like pure ambition. I want Dominic Ferrara. I want the name, the power, everything that comes with being his woman, and you're going to help me get it. I laughed. I couldn't help it. An incredulous, bitter sound. You're crazy. You paid me to make him lose interest. Now you want me to do the opposite. I was scared before, she admitted, walking around my apartment as if it were hers. When I saw that photo of him, when the family told me about the arrangement, I panicked. He seemed dangerous, intimidating, and I didn't want that kind of complication in my life. She stopped, looking at me with that calculating smile. But then I did my research, found out exactly who the Ferrara family is, what they control, the power they have, and I realized I was being stupid. This man isn't a complication. He's an opportunity, the biggest opportunity of my life. You're insane, I said, shaking my head. He's not a chess piece. He's a person. A very powerful person, she corrected. A person who could give me everything I've always wanted. Status, influence, access to a world that people like me don't normally reach. People like you? I repeated, mentally looking around her house. That enormous house. That privileged life. You already have everything. I have family money, she said, and there was bitterness in her voice. Old money that comes with expectations and limitations. But the Ferraras, they have real power. Power that doesn't depend on approval from boards or investors. Power that comes from direct control. And I want that. I sat on my old couch, my head spinning. Then do it yourself. Go after him. You don't need me for that. She smiled, and it was the cruelest smile I'd ever seen. But I do, because he's in love with you. Or rather, with the person he thinks is you. And that's my way in. You're going to keep being Victoria Ashford for a while longer. You're going to win back his trust. And when the time is right, I'll appear. The real Victoria. And I'll expose your lie in a way that makes me look like the victim. The woman who was replaced without knowing. The woman he should have met from the beginning. My blood ran cold. You're going to expose me? I'm going to expose the charade, she corrected, but in a way that benefits me. He'll be angry at you, obviously, but he'll feel he owes me something. That he owes me the chance I should have had from the beginning. And I'll be there. Sweet. Understanding. Everything he needs after being betrayed. It was brilliant. Diabolical. Completely psychopathic. But brilliant. No, I said, standing up. I won't do it. I won't hurt him even more just so you can get what you want. You will, she said with absolute certainty. Because if you don't, I'll expose you anyway. But in a much worse way. I'll tell him everything. That you were paid. How much you were paid. That this was all a charade from the beginning. And men like Dominic Ferrara, they don't react well to betrayal. The threat hung in the air between us. Because she was right. Dominic was dangerous. And if he found out I had lied, that I had approached him for money, that everything had been fake from the first moment, I didn't know what he would do, but I knew it wouldn't be good. You're a viper, I said, my voice trembling with anger. I'm practical, she corrected, and you have 24 hours to decide. Either work with me, earn another $10,000 for your time, and get out of this situation relatively unscathed, or I'll go to Dominic myself tomorrow and tell him everything. Your choice. She turned to leave, her heels clicking against the cheap floor, but stopped at the door. Oh, and Maya? She said, turning her head slightly. Don't try to deceive me or go straight to him with the truth, because I have evidence, messages, bank transfers, everything documented. If you try to sabotage me, I guarantee you'll be the only one who comes out as the villain in this story. And then she left, leaving me alone in my apartment that suddenly seemed even smaller, even more suffocating. I spent the entire night awake, staring at the ceiling, going over my options, which weren't many. I could refuse, could let Victoria expose everything and deal with the consequences. But the consequences could be devastating. Dominic was a powerful man, a dangerous man, a man who made people disappear when they crossed his path, according to rumors. Would he hurt me? I didn't want to believe that, but I also didn't really know that side of him, the side that took over the family business, the side that operated in gray areas of the law. Or I could accept Victoria's plan, continue the charade for a while longer, earn more money I desperately needed. And then, when she appeared and exposed everything, at least there would be a narrative where I was just a piece in her game, not the mastermind. Would it be better? Probably not. But maybe it would be less worse. At 6 a.m, exhausted and without having slept, I grabbed my phone. There was a message from Dominic, sent at 3 a.m. I can't stop thinking about you. Whatever's scaring you, we can work it out. Together. Please give me a chance. My heart broke a little more reading those words, because he was genuine, vulnerable, real. and I was about to hurt him in ways he couldn't even imagine yet. But what choice did I have? With trembling fingers, I started typing a response, and then stopped, because I saw another car parked on the street through my window, black, elegant, and leaning against it, checking his watch, was one of Dominic's security guards. He had followed me last night, or was following me now, protecting maybe, or watching. I didn't know anymore. What I knew was that I was trapped between Victoria and her threats, trapped between Dominic and his feelings, trapped in a web of lies I had helped weave myself. Finally, I finished typing the message. "Can we meet? I need to talk to you." The response came almost immediately, as if he had been waiting, awake all night just like me. "When and where?" "I'll be there." I set a cafe for noon, neutral, public, safe, and then I prepared to do the hardest thing I'd ever done. Go back, apologize, continue the lie, all while knowing the clock was ticking, that eventually the truth would come out, and when it did, there would be no going back, no forgiveness. There would only be consequences, and consequences, I was beginning to learn, were the only thing men like Dominic Ferrara guaranteed. Chapter 8. Who She Really Is.
Tell the truth. Tell the truth.
I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early. My stomach was in knots, my hands shaking so much I spilled sugar 3 times trying to sweeten the coffee I couldn't even drink. I had made a decision during the sleepless night. I was going to tell Dominic the truth, the whole truth. Consequences didn't matter. Fear didn't matter. He deserved to know, deserved to hear it from me before Victoria could twist everything. I mentally rehearsed the words I would say, how I would start, how I would explain the inexplicable, how I would ask forgiveness for the unforgivable. When he walked into the cafe, I immediately knew something was wrong. There was something different about the way he moved, more rigid, more controlled. His eyes found mine, but there wasn't that light they usually had, that relief at seeing me. There was something darker, more dangerous. My heart started beating faster, a primitive warning that something very bad was about to happen. He sat across from me, and the silence that settled was thick, suffocating. He didn't touch me, didn't even try to take my hand like he always did, just looked at me with those dark eyes that now seemed to see right through me. "Thank you for coming," I said finally, my voice coming out weak. "Dominic, I need to tell you." "Maya," he said, and the world stopped. My name, my real name, coming from his mouth. He knew. My God, he knew. The blood drained from my face. My breath caught in my throat. Absolute panic flooded my system. "How?" I managed to whisper. He leaned back in his chair, that relaxed posture that was deceptive because his eyes were alert, calculating, dangerous. "Did you really think I wouldn't check?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. "That I wouldn't investigate the woman I was falling in love with? Especially when there were so many inconsistencies." Inconsistencies. Of course there were. How had I been so stupid to think I would fool a man like him forever? "You don't have credit cards in the name Victoria Ashford," he continued, his voice methodical, almost clinical. "Don't have a social media history that matches who you were supposed to be. Your address doesn't exist in her records. And when my men did deeper checks, they discovered something interesting." He paused, his eyes never leaving mine. "They found a Maya Collins, working at a coffee shop downtown, living in an apartment across town. And she looks exactly like you." I couldn't breathe, literally couldn't pull air into my lungs. He had investigated, had found out, and he was here, giving me a chance to explain, and I was paralyzed with terror. "So, I'm going to ask once, and only once," he said, leaning forward, his hands clasping on the table in a way that seemed casual, but radiated controlled tension. "Who are you, and why were you pretending to be Victoria Ashford?" This was my chance, my opportunity to confess everything, to tell him about the money, about Victoria hiring me, about how it had all started as a charade but become real. I opened my mouth to speak, to let it all out, but then I saw something in his eyes, something cold and calculating, something that reminded me of all the stories, all the rumors, all the warnings about who the Ferrara family really was. People disappear when they cross his path, and suddenly, that didn't seem like distant gossip anymore. It seemed very, very real. I started, my voice shaking violently. "I can explain." "Then explain," he said, and there was a sharp edge to his voice now. "I'm waiting. It's complicated," I said, and immediately knew it was the worst thing I could have said. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Complicated," he repeated, his voice getting lower, more threatening. "You lied about your name, about who you are, about everything. Made me believe I was getting to know Victoria Ashford when all along you were a complete stranger. And all you have to say is that it's complicated? It wasn't like that," I said quickly, desperately. There were reasons. I didn't want to. Didn't want to what? He asked, his voice cutting like a blade. Deceive me? Make a fool of me? Play with feelings I thought were mutual? It wasn't a game, I said, tears starting to fall. What I felt was real, is real. He stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor, and instinctively I pulled back. The movement was small, involuntary, but he saw it, and something in his expression changed, became more hurt, more betrayed. You're afraid of me, he said, and there was something broken in his voice. After everything, you really think I would hurt you? No, I said quickly, but my voice shook, betraying the lie. I don't, it's just that you heard the stories, he finished for me, a bitter laugh escaping, about who I am, what my family does, and now you're terrified that I'll do something terrible because you deceived me. Tears burned my eyes, blurring my vision. Dominic, please, answer my question, he said, ignoring my plea, his voice turning icy. Why did you do this? What did you want? Money? Access? Information about my family you could sell? No, I exclaimed, horrified he could think that. It wasn't any of that. I would never. Then what? He practically roared, and several people in the cafe turned to look. Give me a reason. One single reason that makes sense. Why would someone pretend to be someone else? Why did you approach me under a false name? My mind raced, searching for something, anything I could say that wouldn't reveal the whole sordid truth about the money and the deal, but it was blank, completely blank. It was a misunderstanding, I finally said, and even to my own ears it sounded pathetic. A misunderstanding, he repeated, his voice dripping with disbelief. You met me under a false name, kept using that name for weeks. Let me introduce you as Victoria. Let me fall in love with someone who doesn't even exist. And it was all a misunderstanding? He came around the table, approaching me, and every cell in my body screamed to run, but I stayed frozen, trapped between the desire to confess everything and the paralyzing terror of its consequences. Look at me, he ordered when he was inches away. Look at me and tell me the truth. The whole truth. Now. I lifted my eyes to his, and what I saw there broke me. Pain, deep betrayal, and a cold anger that was more terrifying than any explosion. I started, and my voice failed. I can't, or won't, he asked, and there was so much contempt now. Because it seems very much like you're choosing to continue the lie, choosing to protect information from me instead of finally being honest. It's not that, I said, tears falling faster now. I want to tell you, but I'm afraid. Afraid of what? He asked, his voice getting dangerously low. Of me, of what I might do. My silence was answer enough. Something died in his eyes, that last spark of hope, of chance for salvation. I see, he said, taking a step back, creating distance that felt like miles despite being only inches. You really believe I'm the monster they paint in the newspapers, that I make people disappear, that I'm dangerous enough to physically hurt you. It's not that, I protested weakly. It's exactly that, he said, his voice so cold it made me shiver. And you know what's funny? I would never hurt you. Even now, even knowing you deceived me about everything, the idea of hurting you makes me physically sick, but you don't trust me enough to believe that. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I had never seen in him before. You know what hurts me most about all this, he said, his voice breaking slightly. It's not even the lie about your name. It's that I shared things with you. Opened parts of me I never show anyone. Trusted you in a way I don't trust anyone, and you were lying about something as fundamental as your identity the whole time. I'm sorry, I whispered, knowing it was insufficient. I'm truly sorry. Are you sorry or are you caught? He asked, the question cutting me like a knife, because I need to know. If I hadn't found out, would you have ever told me the truth, or would you have continued this charade indefinitely? I wanted to say yes, that I was going to tell him, that I was ready to confess today, but the words got stuck, because the truth was I didn't know if I would have ever had the courage without being forced. I was going to tell you, I finally said. Today, I was ready to. I don't believe you, he cut me off, and the finality in his voice destroyed me. Because if you were really ready, you would have started this conversation with the truth. You wouldn't have waited until I confronted you. And even now, even caught, you're still hiding something, still not giving me the complete story. And he was right, because I was still hiding the worst part, the money, the deal with Victoria, the fact that I had been paid to deceive him, because I was too cowardly to face the full consequences. Tell me one thing, he said, his voice becoming frighteningly calm. Was anything real? Any moment between us? Any word? Any feeling? Or was it all calculated from the beginning? It was real, I said desperately. Everything I felt was real. It may have started wrong, but what I developed for you? No, he cut me off, raising his hand. Don't do that. Don't try to romanticize this. You built an entire relationship based on lies, and now you want me to believe your feelings were genuine. He shook his head, something like disgust crossing his features. I don't know who you are, Maya, and clearly you don't trust me enough to tell me, so there's nothing more to say. Dominic, wait, I said when he turned to leave. Please, let me explain everything. No, he said without turning around. I don't want to hear more lies, and that's all you know how to give. He started to leave, and absolute panic took over me. I love you, I said, the words coming out in a desperate cry. I know you don't believe it. I know I don't deserve for you to believe it, but I love you, truly. He stopped, didn't turn around, just stopped at the cafe door, his posture rigid. You don't even know what love is, he said, his voice so low I almost didn't hear it. Because love is built on trust, on honesty, and you destroyed any foundation we could have had. And then he left, walked through the door and disappeared into the busy street, and I stayed there, shaking, crying, completely shattered, because I'd had my chance, my opportunity for honesty, and I had chosen fear, had chosen silence, had chosen to protect myself instead of fighting for the man I loved. And now he was gone, believing I was some kind of con artist, some kind of opportunist, without knowing the complete truth, without knowing about Victoria, without knowing it had started as a job but become the most real thing I'd ever felt. I sank back into the chair, my coffee cold and untouched in front of me, and cried for him, for me, for what we could have been if I'd had the courage to be honest from the beginning. And as I cried, my phone buzzed. A message from Victoria. I see you didn't follow my plan. Your problem now. Hope it was worth it. And I realized I had lost everything. Dominic, the money, any chance at redemption, all because I had been too afraid to do the right thing. Chapter 9. The Choice.
Value yourself.
5 days had passed since the confrontation at the cafe. 5 days that felt like 5 years. 5 days in which I could barely get out of bed, could barely eat, could barely function. Jessica showed up on the 3rd day with food and threats. You need to eat, she said, putting containers of Chinese food on my table. But I couldn't put into words the mess I had created. That's when my phone rang. Maya Collins? A female voice asked. Yes, I answered. I'm calling from Dr. Harrison's office. It's about your sister, Emma. She was admitted to the hospital this morning. Diabetic ketoacidosis. Your aunt said she hadn't taken insulin for 2 days because you were out. My blood ran cold. Emma, my 16-year-old sister. My responsibility. The reason I had accepted Victoria's money in the first place. Is she okay? I managed to ask. Stable, but the bills are piling up. I'm going to the hospital now, I said, hanging up and running for the door, Jessica following with questions I barely registered. Dominic was in his office when his assistant knocked on the door. Mr. Ferrara, there's someone here to see you. She says she's Victoria Ashford. The real Victoria Ashford? Yes, sir. Has ID that confirms it. Send her in. The woman who entered was exactly like the photos from the investigation. Blonde, elegant, polished, everything Maya wasn't, and nothing that attracted him. Mr. Ferrara, she said with a practiced smile, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. I'm Victoria Ashford, the real one. He took her hand briefly. Why are you here? She sat down without being invited. I came to apologize and explain. You deserve the truth about what happened. Dominic sat down, his expression neutral. I'm listening. Victoria wove a carefully constructed story. How she had been nervous about the date. How a friend suggested sending someone first to assess the situation. How Maya had offered to help, but then took advantage. How everything got out of control without Victoria knowing. It was a well-constructed lie, plausible, positioning Maya as the ambitious villain, and Victoria as the innocent victim. I can imagine how difficult it must have been to discover you were deceived, Victoria said with false compassion. Maya clearly saw an opportunity and took advantage. It's terrible. Dominic watched her as she spoke. He had spent years reading people, and everything about her screamed calculated manipulation. And now? He asked. What do you want? Victoria smiled. Predatory. I want the chance I should have had from the beginning, for us to really get to know each other, as our families planned. I believe we could have something very advantageous. Advantageous. Not real. Advantageous. Like a business deal. It's an interesting proposition, he said, seeing triumph in her eyes. Maybe we should have dinner. Discuss possibilities. Victoria's smile widened. I'd love to. When are you free? Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. I'll send my driver to pick you up. When she left, clearly satisfied, Dominic remained seated. Let her think she had won, for now. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Ferrara, that report on Maya Collins is ready. Bring it now. Thomas entered with a thick folder. Dominic started reading, and with each page, something in his chest tightened. Maya Collins, 23 years old, worked 50 hours a week at a coffee shop, lived in a tiny apartment, parents dead 3 years ago, younger sister, Emma, 16, type 1 diabetes, under aunt's custody. Maya was the main source of financial support. There were attachments, unpaid medical bills, thousands in debt, expensive insulin prescriptions, service cut-off notices, eviction threats, and then he saw it, a bank transfer, $3,000, from Victoria Ashford to Maya Collins, 2 days before the first date, recovered messages, go ugly, make him give up, 3,000 now, 5,000 after, and Maya's response, I need the money for my sister's insulin. Dominic closed the folder, jaw tight. Victoria had lied completely, had hired Maya, had used a girl's desperation for her own ends, and Maya, drowning in impossible responsibilities, fighting to keep a sister alive, had accepted, not out of greed, out of survival. Thomas, I need an address. Emma Collins, where is she now? General Hospital, sir. Admitted today. Diabetic ketoacidosis. Of course. Dominic grabbed his coat. Emma was in a shared room, connected to monitors when Dominic arrived. The girl was sleeping, pale. She looked like Maya, young, fragile, vulnerable. An older woman sat beside her. Who are you? She asked defensively. A friend of Maya's. I came to see how Emma is. The aunt relaxed slightly. She'll be okay, this time, but I don't know how much longer we can keep this up. Maya does her best, but it's too much responsibility. Insulin costs so much. Every month is a struggle. Maya sacrifices everything to make sure Emma has what she needs. Dominic looked at the sleeping girl. How much? He asked. To cover treatments? To make sure she always has insulin? The aunt blinked, surprised. Tens of thousands a year. Why? Dominic took out his phone, making calls to his accountant, his lawyer, the hospital, arranging for all of Emma's medical bills to be covered, a fund established, insulin delivered monthly, access to the best doctors, everything paid, forever. The aunt watched him, tears falling. Why? We're strangers to you. Because Maya shouldn't have to choose between surviving and saving her sister, he said simply. No one should. He left his card and walked out before more questions. As he drove, Dominic thought about everything. Victoria had offered exactly what he should want. Status, convenience, the logical choice. But Maya had offered something infinitely more valuable, something real, imperfect, complicated, but real. She had laughed at his jokes, had spilled wine, had looked at him as if he were just Dominic, had made him feel alive. Yes, she had lied, but out of love, out of desperation, out of protection, not out of greed or manipulation. There was a difference that mattered. Dominic made his choice. He chose heart. He chose real. He chose Maya. But first he had a game to play, had to let Victoria think she had won, have dinner with her tomorrow, let her believe her lies worked. Because when he finally exposed her, when he revealed he knew everything, he wanted the fall to be devastating. And after dealing with Victoria, he would go to Maya, would beg forgiveness, would promise to never let her face the world alone again, would build something real with her, something honest, something worth fighting for. For the first time since discovering the truth, Dominic smiled. He knew exactly what he had to do. Chapter 10. Chaotic Happy Ending.
No more lies.
I was in line at the pharmacy when my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number with an attachment. I opened it hesitantly. It was a photo of Emma, in the hospital, smiling, holding a new teddy bear, and underneath, just one line of text that made me stop breathing. All bills paid, fund established. She'll never be without insulin again. My hands shook so much I almost dropped the phone. Dominic, he had done this, even after everything, even hating me, even believing I was some kind of con artist. He had taken care of my sister. Tears burned my eyes right there in the pharmacy. Because how could I hate someone like that? How could I accept losing someone who did something so incredibly generous without expecting anything in return? 3 days later, I was serving coffee during my shift when Jessica ran up to me, eyes wide, holding her phone. You need to see this, she said, practically screaming. Now! It's about that guy, Dominic Ferrara. My heart raced. With trembling hands, I took her phone. It was a video, live from some elegant social event. The screen showed Dominic in an impeccable suit, standing on a stage, and beside him, dressed as if she were at a ball, was Victoria. My stomach churned. They were together, publicly. Of course they were. She had won, had gotten exactly what she wanted. But then Dominic started speaking, his voice amplified by the event microphone, and everything changed. Good evening, everyone, he said, that controlled voice I knew so well. I know many of you expected an announcement today about a possible commitment between my family and the Ashford family. Victoria smiled beside him, practically radiant. But there was something in Dominic's eyes, something cold. However, he continued, turning to look directly at her, I cannot in good conscience proceed with any kind of relationship based on lies and manipulation. Victoria's smile failed. Confusion crossed her face. Dominic, what are you? I'm talking about, he said, his voice getting louder, clearer. The fact that you hired someone to pretend to be you, paid $3,000 to a desperate girl to deceive me in your place, and then, when I discovered the truth, you came to me with a completely fabricated story, placing all the blame on her. The color drained from Victoria's face. The room went completely silent. I have the bank transfers, Dominic continued, relentless. The messages, all the evidence of your manipulation. And I want everyone to know exactly what kind of person you really are before they consider doing business with your family. He turned to the shocked audience. Victoria Ashford is a liar, a manipulator, and someone who uses other people's desperation as a tool, and I want nothing to do with her or any alliance with her family. This matter is closed, permanently. The transmission cut off, but the damage was done. I stood there, in the middle of the coffee shop, Jessica's phone still in my hand, completely in shock. He had exposed Victoria, publicly, definitively, had risked business relationships, family connections, everything to tell the truth. Maya, Jessica said softly, are you okay? You're crying. I was, tears falling freely as I tried to process what I had just seen. My shift ended an hour later. When I left the coffee shop, there was a car waiting, black, elegant, familiar. The window rolled down, and there he was, Dominic, looking at me with those dark eyes that had haunted me for days. Get in, he said simply. Please. I should have refused, should have kept my distance, but my feet moved before my brain could protest. I got in the car. He didn't say anything for a long moment, just looked at me, as if he were trying to memorize every detail. Emma's okay, he said finally. I know, I replied, my voice coming out hoarse. I saw, thank you. You didn't have to. I did, he interrupted me, because you shouldn't have to choose between surviving and saving her, and because I understand now why you accepted Victoria's money, why you lied, why you were so afraid to tell me the truth. Tears burned my eyes again. It still doesn't justify what I did. I hurt you, deceived you. Yes, he agreed. You did, and it took time for me to process that, to understand the difference between your lies and hers. But there is a difference, Maya. You lied out of desperation, out of love for your sister. She lied out of ambition, out of manipulation. They're worlds apart. He leaned closer, his face inches from mine. But if we're going to try this, if we're going to have any chance of making it work, I need absolute honesty from now on. No secrets. No lies, no matter how scary the truths are. I can do that, I said, my voice firm despite the tears. But you also need to understand, I'm not from your world, Dominic. I don't know how to navigate elegant dinners or social events. I'm always going to spill things and say the wrong thing, and I'm not going to pretend to be something I'm not. Never again. A slow smile spread across his face. I don't want you to pretend. I want exactly who you are. The girl who spills wine and laughs nervously and looks at me as if I'm just a man, not a name or a position. He paused, something amused glinting in his eyes. By the way, there's something I need to know. That first date, you really were trying to make me hate you, weren't you? My face heated up. Victoria paid me specifically to go ugly, I admitted, to be awkward, to make you lose interest. She literally instructed me, go in sweatpants disheveled, make him want to run away. Dominic started laughing, a real laugh, deep, that made his whole body shake. So you were actively trying to be unattractive? Yes, I said, mortified. And yet I failed miserably at that too. He took my face in his hands, that gentle touch I had missed so much. Maya, he said, his eyes shining with humor and something deeper. If that was you trying to be ugly, then imagine if you had actually tried to impress. And then he kissed me, finally, properly. Not on the forehead like before, but on the lips, deep and consuming, and everything inside me melted. When we pulled apart, both breathing hard, he smiled. Have dinner with me, tomorrow night. A real date this time. No lies, no pretending, just us. Okay, I said, and then added with a smile, but this time I'm really getting dressed up. Fair warning, it might be dangerous. The next evening, I spent 2 hours getting ready. For the first time in this whole mess, I wanted to impress, not as Victoria, as myself. I chose a dress I had bought at a thrift store months ago but never worn. It was dark red, simple but elegant, coming just above my knees. I left my hair down in natural waves instead of the usual messy bun. Light, but careful makeup. And for the first time, I looked at myself in the mirror and felt beautiful, not trying to be someone else, just the best version of myself. When Dominic picked me up and I opened the door, he went completely still. His eyes traveled over my entire body, top to bottom, and the intensity in that look made my stomach flip. Maya, he said, his voice hoarse. You're absolutely stunning. My face heated up. I warned you it would be dangerous. He took a step into my apartment, closing the door behind him, gently cornering me against the wall. Dangerous is an understatement, he murmured, his mouth dangerously close to mine. You have no idea what you're doing to me. Dinner was perfect. We talked for hours. No masks, no lies, just two people really getting to know each other. He told me about the pressure of taking over the family business so young, about how he felt alone even surrounded by people. I told him about my parents, about how I had become responsible for Emma overnight, about my dreams of maybe one day being able to go to college. When we walked back to the car, his hand in mine, everything felt right, imperfect, complicated, but right. You know my world is dangerous, he said suddenly. There will always be risks, threats, precautions. Do you still want this? I looked at this man, powerful, intense, dangerous in every way, and completely mine. Our love started with the biggest lie possible, I said. I pretended to be someone else. You investigated me without me knowing. None of this was normal or healthy. I smiled, squeezing his hand. But it survived the truth, survived the exposure, survived everything. So yes, I want this. I want you, danger and all. He pulled me into a kiss that promised everything. Passion, protection, danger and love. Most of all, love. And as we stood there in each other's arms, I knew this wouldn't be easy, would never be simple, but it would be real. It would be ours, and it was worth every risk.
Did you enjoy this story? I truly hope so. I laughed so much while writing every detail, an unpredictable meeting that turned into an unexpected love between two people from completely different worlds. May love overcome everything. Leave a comment telling me what you thought about the story and give it a rating from 0 to 10. Your feedback is incredibly important to me, so I always know how I can improve. Thank you so much for your time. Until the next story, darling.